Hello, so today we're going to take our second look at mini notation during mini notation week. So last time we looked at a few things. So we looked at how to play a sound, how to play a variant of that sound, and then how to make sequences. We then looked at making patterns of the notes separately from the sounds. So using the N pattern here, we're playing different samples from this CPU folder in a sort of more efficient way than writing it out using the colon notation here. We looked at how to insert gaps, sort of silences, using this squiggly tilde, which I hope you found on your keyboard by now. And also how to break down steps. So here, the third step, using the square brackets, is broken down into two. So we have 4 steps, and the third one is broken down into, or in here, in this case, into 3, or broken down, so steps within broken down, steps are broken down further by putting square brackets inside square brackets. So today we'll be expanding on this. It's going to take a bit longer because I want to get through more material, but I'll also be sharing worksheets so you can go through it in your own time. And also I'll be working on reference material, which I'll put up a bit later. But let's start with speeding up, repeating and slowing down steps. So let's start with a simple high-low pattern. So to speed up a step, we use the asterisk, which is an alias, I guess, for multiply. So if I say multiply this by 3, that means play it 3 times as fast. So it's playing this step 3 times as fast. You can see here underneath, I've got a little diagram that pops up. So the first half of the cycle is taking it by the high, and the second half of the cycle is taken up by 3 lows. So it's actually taken, it still takes up 1 step, but it squeezes 3 copies of it in there. So another thing we can do is do that with this subsequence notation. And it'll do a similar thing. So you can hear the high, takes a long time, then it goes high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. So it's repeating the high, low 3 times. But we can also say repeat it 1.5 times. That's a bit stranger. Like, how can you repeat something 1.5 times? Let's have a look. So it alternates between doing high, high, low, high, and high, low, high, low. And that's because to play this 1.5 times, it goes through once, and then it carries on and plays half more. So once has got 2 steps, and then it plays an extra step. So it goes high, low, carries on, runs out, goes back to the start. But then the next time around, it carries on where it left off, and starts with a low. We can make this a bit clearer, but by actually speeding up the whole sequence. So if I multiply that by 2, we can actually see visualized. It's going twice as fast, and so in the space of 1 cycle, remember we're only visualizing the first cycle here, we can see the full cycle. So here, high, high, low, high, high, low, high, low. There we go. So that repeats. So one thing you might have expected that to do is something more like this. So high, low times 3 is the same as doing this, but maybe what you wanted was this. But you got this. If you want things to repeat on the same metrical level, then in that case you can use, instead of the asterisk, you use the bang or the exclamation mark, and you can see that does the same. And if I increase that, then I could to say 6. You can do that, no problem. And the same with so there you go. So that's speeding up with multiply. There's repeating with exclamation mark. And what about slowing down? Well, you do that with a slash. So let's say I wanted to slow down this step by 2. So you can hear it's only playing that low note every other time. And that's because it's taken this step, only is playing the first half the first time round, but then the second time round it plays the second half, but the second half of doesn't contain any trigger message. This is a bit hard to get your head around actually with Tidal. So we're dealing with events here, but actually it's only the start of event that actually has any effect on the sound. So when Tidal gets to the start of the cycle, it'll tell SuperDirt to play the high sound, and it will. But if you cut an event in half, then the second half doesn't contain any trigger messages. It's just the same as being silent and is only of use if you're combining it with another pattern. Otherwise, it's as if it wasn't there. So again, I can multiply this by 2 and sort of see what's happening a little bit better. It gets confusing. Actually, that just seems like it's just really buggy. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Yeah, it hasn't managed to visualize it at all, so that's not useful at all. Let's ignore that. I'll have to work on that visualization. But if we instead put like a high and a low here, that means that the first time round it would play the high, and the second time round it would play the low. Well, the other way around. It'll alternate between them. So let's put a clap here just to make it a bit more distinctive. Is that clear what's going on? So it's always playing the clap for the first half, and then the second time it'll alternate between playing the low and the high. So now it's divided this by 2. The first time round it'll play low high, and the second time round it'll play bass drum, snare drum. Again, you're only seeing the first cycle, and I'll have to make it go faster to see both bits. Another way you can speed something up, jumping slightly ahead, is by using a function. So let's go back to this. And I can put fast 2 to make it go twice as fast, or fast 8. Sounds good. We'll be looking at manipulating time using fast a bit later. It gets quite fun. Right, now you do get some funny things happening if you take low, high, BD, like a 3-step sequence, and divide it by 2. It still divides it in 2, but then you end up with some interesting time signatures going on. So here it's playing 1.5 steps in the space of 1. Let's try something here. Yeah, the visualization is going to get quite funky at this point. Let's ignore that. Speed it up. You can kind of hear there's some order there, but it takes a while of listening before you start to feel the cycle that's going on. Sounds good. So play about with that. There's lots of fun to be had there, just with speeding up and slowing down substeps. Right. So the next thing in my Tidal file is polyphony. So with the comma. So at some point we looked at how you can have multiple patterns happening at the same time. You can actually do that kind of thing all within the same pattern. So if I took this as my sequence and put a comma there and then had that there, that would be the same as what I just did, except it's all in the same pattern. And you can kind of see it visualized here. Upside down, but yeah, it's a bit of a hack. Sorry about that. So if you think about this as time going across, then you can see these are all events which are stacked up on top of each other, and then they play over time. And that's how the comma works. It's just a way of having more than one subsequence in one step. So let's have clap snare here. So the first half has now got this interesting sort of polymetric sequence going on, and then the second half is just the clap snare. So that's that. There is more to explore with this. So there's actually a different set of parentheses. So here we've got BDSN and we've got RP. Let's just do it like this. So SD sounds more than like a snare drum than SN, at least the default one. So now we can hear BDSD against RP 0, 4 and 5. And if we speed that up, so we can see 4 repetitions here. Starts to sound a little bit disco, but you can see that's just repeating 4 times straightforwardly. But what I want to compare it with is this. So what happens if we replace the square brackets with curly brackets? Well, what happens is that instead of squashing both subsequences into one cycle, it will do that for the first one. So BDSD will happen within one cycle, but the other subsequences will not. But the steps will align. So let's have a look. So you can hear that they are now lining up. So BDSD is still repeating in the same time frame, but RP has actually slowed down so that the steps align. So this is a case where the steps are actually in charge. Normally it's always the cycle which is the reference point, but actually in this one case of this sort of polyrhythmic curly bracket syntax, it's actually the steps that align. So RP0 lines up with BD0, so that's this and this. Remember that 0 is the default. But then RP4 lines up with SD, and then when it comes to RP5, that lines up with BD because this is repeating, and so is this, but just at different rates. So they're kind of phasing in and out of each other. So let's look at that again here. The cycle is aligning, and here the step is aligning. I'll give you lots of examples for that because polyrhythm is super easy in Tidal and polymeter, and in like conventional music software, it's usually not as easy to have as much fun playing with different polyrhythmic time signatures. But that's the basic idea. It's making the steps align so that they're cycling at different rates, but still lining up perfectly step by step. Right, rhythmic feet with the full stop or period. So this is where you have things like this. So we have one step which is has two things and one which has three things in. There's just sometimes it's if you have a lot of this sort of thing. Let's see. This isn't going to sound like great music, but I'm trying to demonstrate, so try not to think of it, listen to it too critically. Right. So here I've got four steps. This has got two things, this has got three things, this has got two things, this has got three things. And it's just a little bit awkward to keep tabs of where those start and stop. So what you can do instead is use this, which kind of marks out the rhythmic feet. And it'll do exactly the same thing. It's just like separating subsequences a different way. This means that using the full stops, you can't put subsequences within subsequences like you can easily like this. You can't do that by putting a dot there because that'll just create something else on the same level. It'll sound slightly different. But if you want to do that, you can just use the square brackets within the full stops, no problem. So now these two are the same. So the full stop is just for, on the same sort of metrical level, you're just marking out the kind of rhythmic feet of the rhythm. Let's slow it down to hear it a bit more clearly. Well, maybe it's easier to see that than hear it. It's kind of making sure it's divided into four parts. So there's the two steps there with the subsequence, there's another two, and there's the three again with that one sped up and multiplied by two. But they're in perfect quarters. Right, so that could be useful. It's not something that I use that much, but when I do use it, I think, oh, actually, that's quite a nice way of quickly sort of marking out a rhythm. So yeah, maybe it's something to explore. One step per cycle with this. So this takes us back to where we're dividing things like this. Well, let's just do this, shall we? So if we wanted to just play one of these per cycle, we could of course just divide it by 3 as we saw earlier in this video. So if I speed that up by 3, we can see all 3 cycles in one. So it's always playing the high, but then it's stepping between RP 0, 1 and 2 every cycle. But instead of doing that, we can not do the division, but instead use another kind of bracket. So you can use angle brackets, and that just means pick one per cycle. So that has the advantage that you don't have to change the number all the time. So if you think, oh, I'd like to have another RP in there, you'd also have to remember to change that to 4 to make sure that you're only picking 1 step per cycle. But here you can just stick it in straight away. You don't have to remember or count. You can just say, I only want 1 there. So you can still sort of make sub-steps. So that third time round you get 2 sub-steps instead of 1 step. Right, I think that's plenty for now. I hope that's useful. I'll make another worksheet to go with this, and also will make some reference material with the visualizations for you to look through. It'll take me a little bit longer to make the reference material probably. So to get it up as soon as possible, I'll get the video up with the worksheet first. But yeah, thanks for watching and see you soon.